Greetings, global gardeners. Did you notice? That's a little bit new. I'm going to give credit to Dave. I was on the Urban Gardener podcast yesterday talking about my book with Enoch and Mark, and Bowtie Life in the Garden was on and said, Greetings, global gardeners. Now, he had a great day of alliteration, and I liked that. Normally, I say hello, good morning, but I like the greetings, global gardeners. So we'll see if that sticks. And if I remember to do it from week to week, you may hear more of it. So thank you for that, Dave. I appreciate your alliteration. And let's get started on this wonderful Monday. You often ask yourself the question, I know you do it. I ask myself the same question, and I've been gardening for decades. Is it too late to plant? And this holds true with so many different things in the garden. We have that fear that if we wait too long, it's not going to work out. It's going to die. We're not going to get the harvest. We're not going to get the pretty flowers. There's something wrong if we wait too long in the garden. Well, today I want to try to let you relax a little bit and realize that it isn't that big a deal, that we have a much broader window of planting than many of us realize. So, by all means, ask me the questions about the plants that you might be most concerned about, but just realize that it doesn't need to be a stress-filled time. There's basically 3 times in our gardening year when we're planting. Typically, it's early spring, then it's late spring, early summer, and then it's late summer, early fall. Depending on what we're growing, whether we want a spring crop, a summer crop, or a fall crop, there's going to be different times of the year that we plant. As long as we are within the appropriate window for those different times, we can relax. And even if we miss the window, there's usually a follow-up season that gives us an opportunity to grow those plants again. So that's the topic of today. Shout out to Shandy's Garden. Thank you so much for that. I can't wait to see your book when it arrives. Hopefully you'll get some work done in the garden and had a beautiful weekend like I did. Thank you for that, Shandy. Appreciate the support. And I've had great weather last week. The rest of this week looks pretty good. I have been able to get out in the garden. Had a beautiful weekend. I was on the show I mentioned with Enoch and Mark, the Urban Gardener book review, talking about the book. So they did a very thorough job. If you're interested in seeing more about the book until it arrives, they were picking out favorite sections and we were talking about it. So I appreciate that. It is being very well received, and I'll be appearing on a few more podcasts in the next couple of weeks to talk about it with other well-known gardeners as well who have read it and like it. So that's just thrilling for me as an author to have so many people like the book. So let me know, Shandy's Garden, when we get to that point. You should. I think it's supposed to be there today, if I remember right. So look for it, and maybe next week you can tell us all about it. So do want to mention, as we talk about when is the right time to plant and when it's too late to plant, let's start with this comment from Trolled. And hello to you from Oslo. Had the first 2 tulips open today. I love that. My tulips have not opened yet. I had my daffodils that opened for the first time just a couple days ago. And so here in Colorado and in Norway, things definitely happen at a much later time than many of you. I'm sure many of you have already been enjoying your daffodils and your tulips and all of the other spring flowers. And that has to deal with our own individual weather, how cold our soil is, how fast the days warm up. All of those factors play into when the bulb or the rhizome wakes up and sends up the flowers. It has nothing to do with the hardiness zone. And I see so many recommendations on YouTube, in blogs, on Facebook that say you should be planting based on your hardiness zone. And this, I think, is kind of the beginning of how we get into this stress filled moment because we see somebody that says in zone 5, you should plant between April 1st and April 15th. And I saw that this morning on a blog post from a couple years ago. Well, that's totally wrong. But if you're in zone 5 and you see a blog post that says you should be planting between April 1st and April 15th, and you live in a place like Norway or Colorado and a huge number of other places where it's still below freezing at night. My soil temperature is slowly climbing, but it's not warm enough to support my big lush garden that I like to grow. If I attempt to plant between April 1st and April 15th in my zone 5 Colorado garden, it's sure death for all of those plants that I'm putting in the ground, even when the weather is great. So 2 days ago, we set a record high temperature here in my part of Colorado. My garden saw 80 degrees Fahrenheit. That's 27 Celsius. And just down the hill in Colorado Springs, they had 84 degrees Fahrenheit, 29 Celsius here in the middle of April. It's a record. What happened this morning? This morning it was below freezing and I had snow. If I had succumbed last week to the pressure of thinking I'm supposed to be planting the first 2 weeks of April because I'm in zone 5, I would have exposed all those plants that were put in the ground last week during wonderful weather to the cold, freezing, snowy conditions of this week. My last frost date is more than a month away. And so, too often we get fooled by daily temperatures and we don't look at our climate. We don't look at the pattern of the weeks of temperature and the months of temperature that are going to affect our plants. So, our own decisions of when to plant really come down to our individual garden and not the advice of somebody who's just trying to give a blanket statement that is wrong for many, many gardeners. For me, May 18th is the date I use for my last frost date. And so when I look at a seed packet or when I research a plant and then go buy it online or buy it at a nursery, and I find out that I should put the plant in the ground after my last frost date. Well, for me, the starting point of my decision is May 18th. I'm not planning to put that plant in the ground before my last frost date. It doesn't mean that the day after my last frost date is safe to put the plant in the ground. And this also leads to some of that stress of we can't get our plants in the ground because we're working, we're busy, we're traveling, whatever it happens to be when our last frost date hits. And now we have to wait a week. And the question always comes up, did I wait too long? I missed my last frost date by a week. Is it too late to plant? It's not. Last year, I had one of my best years ever in the garden. The year before was probably the second best that I've had in my garden. Both years, I didn't put my plants in the ground until the second or third week of June, almost a full month after my last frost date, I was putting plants in the ground. Was that too late? No, not at all. In fact, it was ideal for those plants to grow well and give me all the production I was looking for. The soil temperature becomes critical. Don't look at the date on a calendar when trying to decide whether it's too early and too late. When you look at what the plant needs, the conditions that the roots want to have in the soil, the conditions that the leaves want to have in the sun and the air. When you give the plant what it needs to grow, it's going to be much better, which means the calendar date might be off. The recommendation from that blog might be off by a week or two, or maybe even a full month. Masabi Gal says, I figure if I'm late in spring, the autumn could be later and it won't be a concern. It's all fickle. Exactly. And that's why I said earlier, if you miss one season, there's usually a backup season. So I do that all the time. If I plan to put something in the ground in spring and I can't get to it, I'll do it in fall. I'm doing that this year. I'm going to be traveling here in a few weeks. I'm going to miss my window for spring growing. That's okay. I'll just fall back to fall to do my cool season planting. And I'm not stressed about it at all. I'm still going to be doing lots of gardening. I'm going to see lots of gardens. I'm going to get that garden fix in different places. It's just not going to be in my own garden during that window that I normally operate in. Now, a critical component when we're trying to decide when our plants should go in the ground is how long it takes for that plant to reach maturity. Now, a lot of the similarities here, and there's two primary things when I'm talking about growing plants. Generally, I'm talking about annual plants, and it's both flowering annuals and then the vegetable garden plants that we're trying to get to a harvest to. So if you're trying to grow a plant for cutting flowers, for instance, there is that window of planting that is ideal for the blooms to reach the point that you want to cut them. For our vegetable garden, there's an ideal time that we want to put those seeds in the ground or those transplants into the beds so that we get the harvest that we're looking to. First point is the last frost date in spring. That's when many of these plants are put into the ground, either slightly before or slightly after, depending on what type of plant they are. The other consideration is the first frost in fall. So you need to know both of those dates. That effectively defines your growing season. And so when you're putting a plant in the ground, particularly one that you're going to harvest for the fruit or the root or the leaves, it's very helpful, pretty necessary to understand how long it's going to take for that plant to reach maturity, for it to get to the point that you're going to harvest it. And so let's look at it this way, particularly for a summer crop like cucumbers. I grow a lot of cucumbers, particularly pickling cucumbers that might be a 60 or 65-day cucumber. That means once the plant is in the ground, it's going to take 60 days for me to begin harvesting my first cucumber. The seed packet tells me that I can put the seeds in the ground after my last frost date. But what if I get delayed? What if I don't get the seeds in the ground in June, a month later than normal? What if I can't get my seeds in the ground until July? Is that too late to grow those cucumbers? Well, all I have to look at now is that 60 to 65-day target of how long it's going to take for me to begin harvesting the cucumbers. So if I don't get those seeds in the ground until July, I still have all of August and all of September to grow those plants, because typically I don't have my first frost until the first week of October. And so I've got 60 days. It's going to be tight. It's going to be close. But if my first frost is delayed, that just means I get more and more cucumbers. So I could plant 2 full months later than what's recommended and still get a harvest for a plant like that. The same with something like spinach or beets or lettuce. There are so many of those cool season plants that take about 45 days, maybe 8 weeks to reach that point of harvest. You have to look at that window of time. Let's say, that, again, you've got a 2-month growing window for the spinach, for the beets, for those cool season plants, and you want to get them in before your last frost date because those plants can handle cool conditions. What if you can't make that date? What if you don't get them in the ground until your last frost date? Well, look at your climate, look at your weather for the next 2 months. A lot of those plants are going to bolt. And so if you get them in the ground after that last frost date, in 2 months, what's the weather going to be like? For me, 2 months later would be June and then July. The middle of July here in Colorado gets extremely hot and dry and windy, the kind of conditions that stress those plants. And when those plants are stressed, they bolt. They send up that flower stalk. The taste changes. It's too late to harvest them. So if I wait past the recommended point and past the point that I'm familiar with, I run the risk of not being able to harvest those plants because, in that case, yeah, it probably is too late because of the weather conditions I'm going to encounter. So I do my fallback. I fall back to fall and I put those seeds in the ground in July so that by the time I'm harvesting, they've been growing into August and then into September. And the cooler days of September are not going to cause the bolting. And so I'm going to be able to harvest all of those root crops and all of those leaf crops by just delaying. I haven't missed the season. It was maybe too late for the spring planting, but it wasn't too late for my garden season because I had that backup plan. So those are some of the considerations. Go ahead and see what kind of questions you might have on some of these things. Eva Nichols Art is saying, I'm really going to be challenged with sowing and planting this year as I will be traveling a lot for long periods in May and June. Yeah, and that's a situation I'm in. I'm going to be traveling a lot in May, a little bit in June, and I'm also going to be traveling in September and October. So I have to really look closely at which plants I'm choosing to grow to match the times that I'm going to be in my garden. And this is what I would recommend for you as well. It may mean that you don't grow some of the plants that you normally would grow. Target other plants that can fit into the time that you're going to be in your garden, that fit into not only the window of planting, but the window of harvest. You can still garden, you can still grow plants, you just might not be able to grow some of those plants that you normally would. So, luckily for me, my window is hitting just right. I am going to be gone, and I planned it this way. I'm going to be gone before my normal pepper and tomato planting time. So I'll come back. Last frost date is going to hit a couple days later. Then I'll start monitoring the soil temperature, and then I'll still be able to have my pepper and tomato year. But if it was going to be the beginning of June that I was going to be traveling, I would probably say, sorry, I'm not going to have any tomatoes and peppers this year. Instead, I'll focus on those spring crops and those fall crops and still have the garden, still have the harvest. It'll be just different plants during that time. And so, flexibility, you should all know this by now. Flexibility in gardening makes a big difference. And even though we get in the habit of growing the same things at the same time from year to year, you can break it up a little bit and try growing some different things. And you might have incredible success by putting those windows in place and allowing yourself the flexibility to plant at a different time or choosing a different plant within the times that you're going to be planting. Big Will Dog saying, most of my bare root strawberry plants have sprouted. Good for you. But some haven't. Is it important to moisten the crown as well as the roots? No, quite the opposite, actually. You have to be careful about moistening the crown too much, particularly with the bare root strawberries. The crown is susceptible to rot on those bare root strawberries. Once the plant is actively growing, then yeah, you could water the whole plant. Overhead, the leaves are going to shed off some of the water. The crown is going to be actively growing. But before that point, if that dry root of the or that dry crown of the bare root gets too wet and stays wet, it could rot, and that could actually lead to your crown's not growing and the crown actually dying. So with the bare roots, make sure you're watering the soil to keep those roots moist, and try to keep the crown dry if you can until the leaves start growing. And from that point on, then you'd water it like any other plant, and a little bit of water on top is not going to hurt. But yeah, the focus of the bare root plants is getting the water to the roots so that they can then get up to the rest of the plant and tell it to wake up and get those leaves growing. Emily K says, I've learned it's not one size fits all. You are exactly right. I pay close attention to both the forecast and soil temps for my cold weather crops, and then ignore all my impulses for the warm weather crops. That's a great way to say it. I like that. You have to ignore your impulses. The garden centers here in my part of Colorado are already starting to sell a lot of the plants that go into our gardens. And it happens every year. They're selling these plants a month before they should be put in the ground. And so you have gardeners coming into this area for the first time from other areas where it is normal to plant in April. And they go to the garden center and they see those plants and they buy them and they plant them. And then we have the big snows and the big freezes. I think I may have mentioned this in a recent live stream that 25 years ago, when I first moved here to Colorado Springs, we had a snowstorm in May that dumped more than a foot of snow. And of course, it was accompanied by very cold conditions. That year, I wasn't gardening yet, but that year, anyone that would have been growing those peppers and tomatoes that were being sold lost their crops. It's as simple as that. And they didn't know to resist that impulse. When you go to the garden center and you see those beautiful plants, it's something you want to do. You want to buy those plants. You want to put them in the garden. Resist that impulse. Very well said. Look at your own conditions in your garden, the soil temperature, the weather that is still yet to come, and pay attention to the forecasts. I did that last week. Last week, I was doing a lot of work in the garden. The days were extremely warm. We'd set the record on Saturday. We were very close to setting a record on Friday. It was also very hot on Thursday. And there are different plants in the garden that I want to move around. I did the video where I divided my chives and I moved some of the chives around. There are other plants that need to be divided. They need to be planted. And I was just thinking, it's so hot. You shouldn't, I knew this, you shouldn't be putting plants in the ground when it's this hot. I resisted the impulse. I looked at my long range forecast and I saw that this week it was cooling down. Once we get past this little bit of freezing weather and snow today, it warms up through the week. It's going to be a little overcast. It's not going to be excessively hot. Ideal conditions for dividing plants in my garden, transplanting those cool season plants to different areas, and the likelihood that they'll survive is much higher when you do something like that when the conditions are right than to have the impulse of, wow, it's a beautiful day outside. I think I'll go out and garden and put some plants in the ground. So thank you for that, Emily. That is a great way to approach gardening. Is one size doesn't fit all. You got to look at your own garden, your own conditions, and then decide what you're going to do. Lily says, normally it's cold here in April, so I plan it a little later, but it's already in the 70s and my plants aren't ready. Yep, there you go. It's it's one of those things that the weather, I saw somebody comment, the weather is so fickle that you just have to accept that. And so when you look at the window, and that's really the terminology of the day, is the window you have for planting. Understand the plant. Look at the seed or look at the transplant and what it needs, and you may realize that next week will be a better time, or 2 weeks will be a better time than putting it in the ground right now, because right now may not be best. That can help save you lost plants over the years. Jeanette says, last year my soil temp was 60 degrees and I took the chance and planted my tomatoes and eggplant. Best year so far for those warm weather plants. So yeah, sometimes it works. It's it's the it's the gamble. If everything turns out well, then it was a good decision. If things don't turn out well, then you kick yourself for making the decision. So, soil temperature of 60, I think, is actually a good decision. That is a minimum temperature for tomatoes and peppers. But as long as you wait until you get that 60, you're probably going to have pretty good success. The issue comes when we have really good days like I've been having, and I measure my soil temperature and I'm not even up to 50 yet. The air temperature is completely different than the soil temperature when it comes to those transplants we put in the ground. Now, will tomatoes and peppers do better if the soil temperature is 70 degrees? Absolutely. So 70 is 21 Celsius and 60 is about 16 Celsius. And so there's a big difference between those two temperatures. But that's the general range we're looking for when we're considering putting these summer crops in the ground. And as long as you're at the lower end of that window of temperature, it's going to be fine. So, yeah, best year so far, probably because you waited until the temperature was right. And the plants thanked you for that. Maybe in previous years, you may have planted at the same time, but the soil wasn't warm enough yet. It makes a big difference, absolutely a big difference. Eva Nichols is in Utah right now visiting with granddaughters for Easter break. Good for you. I got to spend the weekend with my granddaughters. It was fantastic. And they're actually going to have a sleepover here in a couple weeks. So I'm looking forward to that. So nothing like visiting with granddaughters, let me tell you. And then I'll get to visit with my grandsons this summer. So that's so nice having grandkids and being able to see them. I always look forward to that. So I'm sure I'll mention that again uh, in the weeks ahead. Llama Llama says, this is the time of year for me in Northern California that for 3+ weeks we may not have a frost. And then mid or end of May, we get a 28 or something. That's below freezing. I now know not to get too excited this early. There you go. Resist the impulse, because Mother Nature is fickle, and it's almost like Mother Nature is sitting up there waiting for that foolish gardener to look up in the sky and think, oh, the weather's great, I'm going to put these plants in the ground, with not anticipating all these other considerations that we need to worry about. Tristan says, I was worried about planting my transplants. I got mad about something last week and rage planted my plants. They went in perfect and are growing well. I'm glad I did it. Okay, good. You shouldn't garden mad, but if it works, then it's worthwhile. But it's that's why I wanted to talk about this today, because too many gardeners, I think, garden worried, and maybe they don't garden raged, but there is that worry that a lot of us have about transplanting, and you should enjoy gardening. Take that rage away, take that stress away, take that worry away. Give yourself extra time rather than force yourself into a situation you're not ready for. Wait a day, wait a week, maybe even, like I mentioned earlier, wait a month. The plants can be so resilient for the result that we're looking for they can handle the adversity. They can handle the wrong time. They can handle the wrong weather, and they can still produce. When you do it at a better time with better conditions, they'll produce even better. And that's really the approach I like to take, is not trying to force the plant to do better, but allowing the plant to do better because I put the plant in at a time that was suitable for me and suitable for the plant, because the soil was suitable and the weather was suitable and everything ended up working out. Gardens Happen says concerns of waiting too long have been on my mind since I haven't been able to get out in my garden much. Exactly. Yeah, particularly if you're having any health concerns that are keeping you from getting outside, you should be focused on your health concerns and understand it's okay that a week or two or three or four might go by before you can get out in the garden. You can still get out in the garden and you can still put out a lot of those plants you had intended to put out, or modify it and put in some different plants that might allow you to still garden, but with a slightly different perspective. Shandy's Garden says a timing hack: put peas or beans in the ground in the fall, and when you see them emerge, it's okay to start planting the cold stuff. Yeah, that's kind of a plant thermometer, and there are a lot of localized variations of that, where you look for a particular plant to bloom or a particular plant to emerge, and that is the indication that it is time to put the other plants in the ground or to put the seeds in the ground. And that's because those plants are waking up when the conditions are right. So, peas and beans in particular have very specific temperatures that they need in the soil before they germinate. And once that temperature is reached in spring, they'll start growing. So if it's warm enough to grow the peas and beans, then it should be warm enough to grow the broccoli and the lettuce and the radishes and the beets and the parsnips. They're all basically in that same plant type, the cool season plants. And yeah, use an indicator plant to determine when you can put the others in. Great hack. It's one of those things that comes with experience. This is a great example of why you might want to keep a garden journal, because you can start tracking those things. I did the video this last week about dividing my chives. My chives are growing like mad right now because the conditions are right. They like the cool soil and they also like the warm weather. And those two things together have just caused my chives to go mad. They're already beginning to flower in April, which is a bit unusual. The soil was warm enough to get them growing. And now the air temperature and the weather is warm enough for them to really do well and actually start to flower. So that's the kind of thing you keep track of in your garden journal. I would recommend to also stick in a thermometer and measure the soil temperature so that next year, when you see that your chives or your peas and beans are doing great, you know that that correlates to about 50 degrees Fahrenheit or 10 degrees Celsius. That's one of those ways that you can figure out your own indicators in your garden. And at the end of the season, you have extra pea and bean seeds, sure, throw them around your yard and wait until they sprout. And that's an indicator that the soil has warmed up enough that you might be able to grow some of those things that you've been waiting for. So as I am looking at my garden, and there's other things out there, of course, that I use as indicator plants, and also I look at insects. So my dandelions are just starting to flower this week, and so that's an indicator as well that my soil is warming up to support the dandelion growth. And dandelions can handle the cool conditions. I'm going out every day now and looking at my dandelions to see when the ladybugs appear. Now, I saw my first ladybug yesterday. That is an indicator for at least my garden that the insects are waking up, that the predators are alive. Often the aphids wake up first. And so I'll have aphids, then I'm waiting for the ladybugs to show up. It looks like it's the opposite this year. I've already seen the ladybug, and I haven't seen any signs of aphids on the plants that normally have the aphids because it's still just a little too early for them. They haven't started to leaf out yet. So, another note for the garden journal that the conditions, these record heat temperatures, are waking up the insects, at least the predatory insects like ladybugs. And the conditions are still cool enough that the aphids are not. What does that mean? When the aphids appear, the ladybugs are going to explode because they're already looking for food. Aphids are a favorite food, of course. So, trying to develop the trends that I have in my garden is an ongoing task, but you should be doing the same thing. Start looking for these patterns, and these patterns may give you an indication of when it's okay to put the plants in the ground, particularly when we start talking about the pest issues. I mentioned this a while back in a live stream. Last year, we had a terrible infestation here in my part of Colorado with grasshoppers. So many of my gardener friends lost a large amount of their crops because of the grasshopper infestation that we had here. I lost nothing. I saw just a handful of grasshoppers in my garden last year, while others were inundated. Why was that? Well, remember, I said I didn't even get my plants in the ground until the third week of June for the most part. When were the grasshoppers emerging and beginning to eat the crops? They were doing that here in my region the first week of June. So when the grasshoppers showed up in my garden, and no doubt they were flying over and they showed up, there was nothing to eat here. So they went someplace else. When they go to someplace else and they find food, they're going to eat that garden, they're going to lay their eggs, and then they're going to begin their life cycle in a nice garden filled with food. They come to my garden where nothing is growing. It's now not a problem. I've disrupted their life cycle. So when my plants are actively growing, there's no eggs to hatch. There's no larvae or nymphs that are going to begin eating my plants. I've essentially missed out on huge problems that something like grasshoppers would bring. And that holds true with a lot of other pests. So I've actually learned, at least in my garden, that delaying works better when it comes to some of the pest control issues I have. So instead of being stressed that I put the plant in too late, I'm actually ecstatic that I put the plant in too late because it can grow much stronger and much better without any of the attacks of pests. And that may be why these last 2 years were so great in my garden, because I pretty much had no insect pests eating my plants at all, because that window of planting allowed me to put them in later than the point that those insects were a problem. So make note of that and start thinking about some of those things. Modify your planting times within the appropriate window and then see how the pests react to that. And you may notice that you, in your individual plan, come up with a better date than what's recommended on the seed packet or what's recommended on a blog or what your neighbors down the street are telling you. Because when I would go to my garden club meetings and we would talk, all the other gardeners are telling me, oh, I put in my tomatoes, I put in my peppers, I did this, I did that. And I was doing none of that. Those same gardeners a month later were saying, oh, I lost all my peas, I lost all of this, I lost all of that. And I'm looking at my garden growing beautifully and thinking, sure, I'm glad I waited a little bit. So There's a lot of flexibility, a lot of flexibility. And if you learn to take advantage of that, then you can actually use it to your benefit. Shandy's Garden says, I'm excited to grow my gifts I bought myself at Funk's greenhouse. Cool. Pineapple sage already tastes delicious as a baby. And I got chocolate mint. They do exist. Yeah, I've actually grown pineapple sage and chocolate mint before. They do exist. They're actually fun in the garden. So this is a good point. I wanted to raise this as well when we talk about that window of planting. And when we look at the harvest time and the point of maturity that we want our plants to reach. Many of the plants we're growing in our vegetable garden can be harvested early. They can be harvested at any point. You can harvest a carrot at any point. You don't have to wait until it's 8 inches long to harvest. You can harvest it when it's 6 inches long. You can harvest spinach and lettuce and a lot of these herbs as soon as the leaves begin emerging. And so when you miss your window of opportunity and you begin looking at the days to maturity and the ideal harvest time, you might still have another week or two to plant, because the ideal time for harvesting spinach on the seed packet might say 60 days. And you're looking at springtime, you want to grow spinach, you're worried that if you wait too long that the plant's going to bolt. And so you think, I don't have 60 days until the hot temperatures of summer. I'm not going to grow spinach. Stop right there. Go ahead and grow spinach and harvest it at 30 days or 40 days. It's going to be baby spinach, but a lot of us go to the supermarket and buy packets of baby spinach and pay a premium for it. You can do the same thing in your garden. You don't have to wait until full maturity to harvest many of your plants. And so, again, as we question our definition of what too late really means, we've extended that window even more by allowing ourselves the flexibility of harvesting something earlier than we normally would. I look at this with my tomatoes, for instance. If I try to grow a beefsteak tomato or a larger tomato that is a 90-day or 100-day variety, I'm really hard pressed to do that, especially if I wait that extra 2 or 3 weeks in June before I get my tomato plants in the ground. I might not reach the maturity date for those tomatoes before my first frost comes in fall. But what does that really mean when we're harvesting tomatoes? That means I'm not going to get that big, luscious, red slicing tomato before the first frost date, but I'm probably going to have an awful lot of green tomatoes on that plant. I can make fried green tomatoes. I can make a green tomato jam. There's lots of things I could do with green tomatoes if I miss the harvest date because I was, quote unquote, too late in putting the plants in the ground. No, I was just too late to reach the red tomato point, but I wasn't too late to harvest. More flexibility built into your plan, more flexibility in how you choose to use your harvests. And that might allow you to, again, reduce your stress level as you're starting to figure out when you want to put the plants in the ground and whether it's time or if you missed the time that you were hoping to plant. You might still be able to do it. So do it. Okay, let's see. Shandy's Garden says, what I'm most excited about when I pick something from a locally grown greenhouse is that I can let it go to seed and it's already acclimated. I don't always have the best luck germinating heirlooms. Yeah, that's actually a nice approach. If you are buying locally, the plants that are doing well, now do be a little bit careful with the greenhouse because a greenhouse, unless you're also growing in a greenhouse, is a slightly different environment than you might have in your outdoor garden. But if it's locally grown, chances are you're going to have much better success if you save those seeds and grow them in the garden. Yeah, I definitely like to do that when we're talking about heirlooms, those open pollinated plants that you can save the seed of. Go to an organic grower in your area. I've done that at farmers markets, where you can go to a farmers market and sometimes find a variety of a fruit or vegetable, and it's being grown in your area by farmers in your area. And if it's an organic grower and it's an heirloom or open pollinated plant, you can save those seeds and put them in your garden. And then you carry on the tradition from that point forward. Aaron's asking, did you put your plants in late because you sensed that there was going to be a grasshopper pest issue, or was it some other more random reason? No, it wasn't random at all. It was purely the soil temperature. I just had this last 2 years, even though it was a very warm spring, in May and beginning of June, it just got really cold and overcast for weeks, and my soil temperature didn't warm up. I like to have a minimum of 60 degrees Fahrenheit to put my plants in the ground, 16 Celsius. And if I don't have that minimum, I don't even think about it. And I prefer for it to be warmer than that. And so that's what happened the last 2 years. My soil just didn't warm up in June like it has in years past. And so it was coincidentally that I noticed that I didn't have the grasshopper problem, because the others were putting their plants in too early. And so when we talk about pests and the timing of our plants, if we put a plant in the ground too early, it can stress the plant. And when these insect pests appear, which plants are they going to attack first? They're going to attack the weakest plants. And so if you've weakened your plants by putting them in the ground too early, well, of course, they're going to be the victims of a grasshopper infestation because they're already weak. I think that's the primary cause of what happened. These other gardeners were putting their plants in based on the calendar. Every year they put their plants in on Mother's Day weekend. That's so common here in Colorado Springs. The end of May, people are putting their tomatoes and peppers in the ground. That wasn't the right answer in the last couple of years. So their plants were weak, they were stressed, the insects appeared, and they lost their plants. I waited until the conditions were right, not a random reason, but a very targeted reason, until the temperature of the soil was appropriate. And then my plants grew strong. Any grasshoppers that did show up had no weak plants to attack. So seriously, I had grasshoppers, but just a handful. I would only see a few here or there, and they'll jump on a plant. If it's a strong plant, it's really not going to have many issues fighting off most of the pests that we have in the garden. And so that grasshopper that's trying to munch on a nice, healthy, thick leaf is probably going to be plucked off by a bird before it does any damage. And I think that's what happened in my case. And so consider those kind of things. I would love to say that I sensed the grasshoppers were coming and I planned my garden to avoid it. I'd love to be able to say that, but that wasn't the case. I just was doing what was best for my plants, and what was best for my plants ended up being best for a number of different reasons. Not only the health of the plants, but the insect deterrence as well. So much appreciated of my own decisions as I started tracking what happened as a result of that. And it definitely makes a difference. Dusty Flats says ladybugs are starting to appear in the house windows. Won't be long to plant out now. There you go. That's one of those things to look for. I look for the ladybugs. Hello, Tony. Nice to see Tony from Simplified Gardening. I hope you've had a nice quiet weekend at work and a nice quiet weekend ahead. And always nice to have you here. Tony gets around. I've said this before. I don't know when Tony sleeps. He's got a full-time job as a firefighter. He's got a full-time job as a wonderful husband and father. He's got a full-time job running his own channel and all of the support that he does with his live streams and with the products he puts out to help gardeners. And I see him everywhere on live streams and participating for so many of the rest of us. So, Tony, you are greatly appreciated. And I just don't know how you do it, but kudos to you, mate. I think that's awesome. Jason says, I found out picketed green tomatoes or picked green tomatoes are the best thing ever because I didn't start my first garden till July. Yeah, there you go. Exactly. When life gives you lemons, you make lemonades. When your garden gives you green tomatoes, you look at it as the best thing ever. I love that. And that's often the case. A number of years ago, I've talked about this periodically. I've lost a couple gardens over the years because of hail here in Colorado, but there was one garden in particular that I lost all my tomatoes in July or the end of June, I should say. And I went to the garden center and picked up a bunch of tomato plants on clearance and put them in the beginning of July, and I still had tomatoes to harvest. I like growing the cherry tomatoes because, at least for me, they tend to mature faster and I can harvest them. But same thing, a year like that, oh man, I was very happy to have green tomatoes because at least I was able to use them. So thank you for that, Jason. They can be really good if you just try something new like green tomatoes. I grow green tomatoes that are intentionally green. So last year I grew two different varieties that were green. One of them was Emerald Giant. It was actually a dwarf tomato plant, and and a number of others. So you can grow tomatoes that are green when they're ripe, and they taste like a ripe tomato, slightly different because I think they're a little more acidic for the most part, most of the green tomatoes I've had, but they have reached maturity and they remain green. That is different than what we've been talking about or what I've been implying about green tomatoes. It's harvesting a tomato that is immature, that hasn't reached the mature stage, the color that it's intended to be. That's what a green tomato is when I'm talking about growing green tomatoes. An unripe tomato, you can still use it and take full advantage of it. Christine Stress Reliever says, I have a neighbor who put in a row of very tall shrubs that now block most of the sun on one side of my garden. Are there any plants that will grow well in part sun? Oh, yeah, there's a ton of plants. So it depends on whether you're growing flowers or vegetables, but let's assume that you're talking about your vegetable garden that used to get full sun and now it's not getting enough. This is actually this actually ties in well. I didn't have it on my list to talk about, but it's a perfect topic when we start talking about the windows of opportunity and when we should put our plants in the ground. So a little while ago, I was talking about the concern that when we put in our cool season plants, that they're going to be maturing at the peak of summer, and then they're going to bolt and we won't be able to harvest them at the ideal maturity. When you've got a shaded part of your garden, those concerns are lessened. You can actually grow the broccoli and the spinach and the chard and the lettuce and all of those plants that might bolt if they were exposed to really hot, sunny conditions. Grow those in the shady part of your garden because essentially you're recreating early spring conditions. In early spring, the plants aren't getting as much sunlight. They're getting cooler conditions in the soil that they're growing in, and they do great. The peas, like we talked about earlier, they like cool conditions. So when you've got an area of your vegetable garden that is not getting that hot summer sun, consider growing brassicas and the spinach and the peas and the root crops that might not like a full sunny condition during the middle of summer. And you'll probably be able to see that some of those plants that you can't grow in other areas of the garden actually can do well in a shady area of your garden. It's like you've created a microclimate of spring in the middle of a summer garden. So I would experiment with some of those plants and see what you like to grow and which ones you end up finding will work in that area. Take the neighbor who took away your son as a godsend to try something new and maybe grow some plants that you couldn't grow previously in your summer garden. And that may be an opportunity for you to have a better garden in the years ahead because of the things that you are able to add to your toolbox. Bowtie Life in the Garden, Dave says, so great to have you 3 times in a week this week. I needed it once here and twice on Enoch's show over at the Urban Gardener. So might we get another video this week for fur. So yeah, the video this week is already done. It's coming out on Thursday, so you'll definitely get a video this week. And so I was on Enoch's show yesterday, my show today, video on Thursday, and then I'll be on Enoch's show, The Urban Gardener, again next Sunday. So yeah, it's a for week for you and anyone else that was here yesterday and wants to participate next week as well. So yeah, trying to be as active as possible. I'm actually trying to do a whole bunch of videos right now. Whole bunch is relative. So I typically am doing 1 or 2 videos a week, and then I'll determine when they're released. But because I'll be traveling for a while in May, I'm trying to front load and get all those videos done over the course of the next couple of weeks so that even when I'm gone, I'll still have videos coming out. So just a little bit of heads up that when we get into May, those first 2 weeks of May, I'm not going to have a live stream because I'll be traveling, but I'm going to attempt to do a live stream on the road. So keep your fingers crossed. Maybe that will happen. If I'm not able to do a live stream, might be able to work an alternative to at least provide something during this normal Monday time slot. So I'm still working on that, still trying to figure out how I can make that happen, but it's possible. But yeah, there'll still be weekly videos coming out, even if I don't have the live stream on those 2 weeks in particular. So it's coming. It's coming. Karen's asking, Gardener Scott, how do aphids get on my plants in my back bedroom after the seeds sprout? You know, the thing about aphids, they fly. Most of us see the aphids crawling around on the leaves, but that's how aphids get from point to point is they fly. They don't walk from plant to plant. They fly and then they find a nice happy plant, and one of the first things they do, because aphids are female and aphids have wings and aphids lay eggs as soon as they land on a plant. And so that's why your plants are suddenly infested by aphids, because 1 or 2 of them flew in and then laid eggs immediately. And before you know it, you've got hundreds of aphids on a plant. So somehow an aphid flew through a window, flew through a door, flew through your house, and found your plants. If that, unless you took your plants outside, that's how they do it. They're flying all over the place. You know, if you look closely, they're so small, but every now and then I'll find an aphid in my house, usually during the summer because it's just too cold at other times of the year. It's just like ladybugs. I found a ladybug in my house a couple months ago. And so they weren't coming from outside. That ladybug would have come into my house sometime probably last fall, and it might have been a larva that came in on something, and then maybe it just waited and then became an adult and waited, and then I saw it. So Insects travel a long distance, and you never know exactly how they find their way into your garden, uh, and then you're completely confused when you find out that they find a way into your house. But it happens, and there often isn't much you can do about it, but just look, observe, pay attention, and try to deal with them before they become a problem. Texas Organic TV, Mobius is saying, I would love to hear about what you think. You can make your own. Um, and oh, that wasn't the one I was clicking on. I was actually meant to click on Bowtie Life. You're more than welcome to my Triple G. There you go. Greetings, global gardeners. Thank you for the shout out too. I'm honored. So you were amazing with your alliteration yesterday. So I thought I would borrow that, and of course, want to give you the credit. I like to give credit where credit is due, and it is one of those things that got to take advantage of other people's good ideas. Mobius says, I'm seriously going to make a proper mushroom bed in a place where the sun doesn't shine. An entire planting bed going to waste, unacceptable. Yeah, there you go. That's actually a really good idea. I experimented a little bit growing mushrooms in straw bales in my garden a few years ago. I filmed it. It didn't end up making it into video form because it just didn't work out. And I wanted to do a video about how to grow mushrooms as opposed to how to grow mushrooms not very well. But that's a great idea. I'm actually, you'll be seeing in my garden in the weeks ahead. I'm putting fences in my garden to create shady areas for this exact reason, because I've attempted to grow the mushrooms before and they just don't do well. I've got too much sun and not enough shade that I have to create shade. If somebody else creates the shade for you or you make your own shade, mushrooms, great idea, because they don't like that direct sunlight. They need those shady conditions. So good idea. Good idea to shift a little bit and try to do mushrooms. Pablo Toscano is saying, in my country, we are now in fall and my tomato plants are giving me a second harvest. I'm surprised to have tomatoes still in fall. Awesome. And so, yeah, this ties in with what I was saying earlier, where even if you're late in planting, if that first frost is delayed, now all of a sudden you're not late anymore. And if you did everything on time based on your normal pattern, and you don't get your first frost until later, you get a second harvest. Oh, that's a bonus. Good for you. Congratulations. I love having those second harvests, and tomatoes are a great example. I had that with my peppers last year. I was growing all of those different Hungarian peppers, but I was also growing some hot chilies and had a frost threaten, was able to harvest a lot of ripe fruit on my peppers, but there were a lot of green peppers that were still left on that weren't fully ripe yet. So I covered that bed with plastic, kept it warm until the frost threat was gone. And then we had a couple weeks of really nice warm weather, took the plastic off, and I got a second full harvest of my pepper plants because I just did a little bit of protection during that frost range. Oh, I love second harvests. So you can plan for that if you do the protection as part of your plan. If you know frost normally comes during a particular time, and if you're like me here in Colorado where the frost hits and then it warms up and then it comes again later, you might be able to gain an extra week or two or even more by just protecting your plants during that critical frost period and get a much longer season and maybe potentially a complete second harvest. So I love that. Goth Brooks is saying, hello, I transplanted some strawberry plants in my green stock. They're pretty droopy several days in. Should I cut away some or all of the fruit and leaves, saving the crown? Excuse me. Yes. And so I talk a little bit about that in the video I did last year when I planted my bare root strawberries. Coincidentally, the video coming out on Thursday is my video about growing strawberries in a green stock. And I talk a little bit about that, about trimming off the fruit and the runners in particular. I wouldn't cut off the leaves. The leaves are what are collecting the sun for photosynthesis to give the energy to the roots to develop a support system. So uh, I, if the leaves are drooping and then they start turning brown, then yeah, you can cut off those leaves because they're no longer providing photosynthesis. But definitely cut off the flowers, cut off the fruit, cut off any runners that are developing, because you want the energy going into the root system to be able to support the plant now that it's in the green stock. And now, if it's, you kind of have to gauge the amount of roots you have versus the leaves. So if you dug up a full size strawberry plant and in the process you didn't get all of the roots, then in that case, yeah, you would want to trim off some of the leaves because the roots don't have enough energy to support the 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 transplanted strawberry. But if it was a strawberry plant without a lot of leaves yet, then you can leave those leaves, and they're going to help benefit the root development. So there's a balance there, and it's kind of hard to figure out. But if it looks like they're top heavy, if it looks like a lot of strawberry leaves, and when you put them in the ground, you had that thought, oh, there's not a lot of roots here, that's when you would want to prune off some of those leaves. But definitely take away the fruit, definitely take away the runners, and that should help them get established a little bit more. And the crown really is what you're focused on. If there's any doubt and you're concerned, then go ahead and trim off some of those leaves. But the crown needs the energy for more leaves to emerge. And so at least leave some leaves to feed the plant so that the crown has enough energy to continue growing. And that should give you some of the success that you're looking for. and the strawberries in a green stock can work. So be sure to check out that video, because started filming that video a year ago. And it is one of my videos that covers an entire year of growing plants. In this case, it's the green stock, it's the strawberries. But on Thursday, you'll see the entire year from when I planted to I actually harvested my first strawberry last week. It was incredible. I've never harvested strawberries in April, but by growing my strawberries in my green stock, I harvested strawberries. Incredible. Absolutely incredible. It's those small moments in gardening that really become ingrained in our memory. And I won't ever forget the very first black cherry tomato I had in my greenhouse in December, just like I now won't forget the first strawberry I had at the beginning of April in my green stock. So it's so much fun, those things. Christine, stress reliever, thank you so much for that. Thank you for all your knowledge and encouragement. You are very, very welcome. I appreciate all of your support, and thank you for that contribution to help the channel and to help me, and for those kind words. I do appreciate it. And I appreciate all the support. So many people doing so much for so many of us, not just for me, but to each other. All the comments and the answers and the help and the support and the encouragement. This is just such a wonderful, wonderful channel. I love you all. Big Will Dog says, Gardner Scott, do you think you'll ever do a video about how you got started on YouTube and the successes, failures you had along the way? I'd love to hear that. Yes. And so that's on my list. And so I kind of have a plan. And the plan is, once I get the major structures in my garden done, and I've got one more big structural defenses I was talking about coming into my garden this year, that I want to start doing a series of videos where I'm sitting in my gazebo surrounded by my beautiful garden, and I'm just sharing how I got here on YouTube, how I got here in my gazebo, if you can picture this in the months ahead. And that's on my list of things to talk about is the YouTube channel, and to actually do a couple videos about getting started. It's at the top of my list, not at the top of my list of the videos I'm doing next, but the top of my list of that series of videos. And it's how to start a gardening channel on YouTube. And then moving into the series is how to grow a channel and then how to sustain a channel. So, yeah, I definitely have a series of videos in mind that will come at a later date. So, thank you for that idea, and you will see it. But it's most, I make a lot of videos. So I made the video this last week on how to divide my chives. It didn't do well by Gardner Scott standards as far as how many views it gets, but I didn't expect it to get a lot of views. I wanted to do a video on how to divide chives because I've never done a video on how to divide chives before. I've done a video on how to collect seeds from onions and chives, but I've never done a video on how to plant and divide chives. So I wanted to make it, fully knowing that it wasn't going to get a lot of views, because unless you're interested in growing chives, you're not going to watch that video. I am okay making those kind of videos. When you are trying to grow a YouTube channel, you often have to make those videos that people are going to want to see, that build your audience. Once you reach a point where you don't really have to worry about that anymore or don't care about it, I love getting new subscribers. I love getting new viewers. Of course, that's a big reason why I do this. But I'm okay making a video for a small group of people to help out that small group of people. And that's kind of what we're talking about here. Not everybody wants to know about how to build a YouTube channel, especially a gardening YouTube channel. So that's why I want it to be right. And I want it to be with a very specific focus, with the right environment for me to talk about it. And it will come at a time when I don't need to make videos to get a lot of views, and probably during a quiet time of the year when a lot of people aren't watching anyway, you'll probably start seeing some of those videos appear. So look at them. That's one of the things about the subscribing to a channel and clicking the bell notification. You're much more likely to see those kind of videos come out, because the video, I'm guessing many of you didn't even know I had a video last week on how to divide chives, because when YouTube's algorithm looks at what videos it's going to give you, it doesn't give you all of my videos. I'm doing videos every week, but you might not see that my videos are even coming out if it's a subject that doesn't match the kind of videos that you've watched before. And so that's why this week's video doesn't have a lot of views, because I know a lot of people who are subscribed to my channel didn't even know it came out, because they're not growing chives, because they've never watched a chives video before. So YouTube isn't showing them mine. That's where the subscription and the bell notification really does make a difference, is you're more likely to see those unique videos that don't have the big audiences. And if you're looking for those future YouTube videos, or how to be a YouTube star, those kind of fall into that category. I can tell you right now, most of you will never even know when those videos come out, because I watch those videos on how to grow your YouTube channel and how to make videos and how to do. I watch those videos on a regular basis. So I get the favorite channels in that genre pushed to me all the time. And I know almost all of you are not watching those same videos. So it's crazy how this YouTube thing works. And that's why I say I have a plan of how to make those videos, knowing that nobody's going to see them. But there's a few that want to see them. So they're coming. They're coming. A long answer to a basic question. Lauren says, I had some chives I'll be dividing in a few weeks. I'll be looking for that video. It's out now, so you can find it. And And so I divided the chives for the video, talked about dividing it. I've divided more since I made that video. I've got chives all over my garden now. And they, they're, like I said earlier, a couple of them have already started flowering. I love the chives flowers. Now, the basic chives plants have that lavender purple flower. Beautiful. I absolutely love it. You can also do the same with garlic chives, but the garlic chives have a white flower. So if you grow something perennial like chives and treat it as a perennial flower, you can actually put it into your beds and get lavender or white flowers, depending on what kind of chives you're growing. And you can harvest those flowers, use them in a salad. You can use them as a garnish. They're edible. And then, of course, you can harvest the chives at any point. So chives are a great plant to grow. And I love them. I talked about that in the video. I love them for the flowers in particular. And that's why I'm putting them all over my garden, is for the flowers, not because I need that many chives, but because I'm using them as a perennial flowering plant to get the color that I want to get in the garden. So there you go, Jay. Thank you so much for that. Jay does such a great job. And Jay's another one like Tony, who just is everywhere. So she does a great job with the Urban Gardener live streams as well. So that's wonderful. I just saw notice of which one was it? The was it Mark's channel? I'll have to. I don't want to misstate it, but I just saw. I think next month. That's what it was. Next month. I knew it wasn't next week. That's what was throwing me off. So the Urban Gardening channel every month does their book club, and so this week, yesterday, the book club had my book, Gardner Scott's Guide to Raised Bed Gardening. Next month, they're having Epic Tomatoes. And so, great book. I actually did a video about it a number of years ago. It's one of my favorite tomato books. Next week or next month, they're having Greg LeHoulier, the author of Epic Tomatoes, to talk about his book during the book club show on urban gardening. And Jay, of course, will be there, I'm sure, because she plays an active role in that. So if you haven't checked out the Urban Gardening channel on weekends, they have a Saturday show and they have a Sunday show. The guests there are amazing. And it's still a small channel, still doesn't have a lot of views, but the guests on the shows are incredible. They deserve a much bigger audience because they're getting people like Gardner Scott and Greg LeHoulier and Tony O'Neill and so many others that are on the Urban Gardening live casts on both Saturday and Sunday. So yeah, definitely check that out. And I agree, Tony. Jay is an awesome moderator. Tony's well aware of her too, because wherever Tony is, it seems that Jay is. So I think that's so often a wonderful approach to take. Susan Suing says, interesting. I watch your videos about areas I am not necessarily interested in, as I always learn something I can apply to some area if my garden or I have now learned something new to explore. Yeah, and so that's why I do a lot of these videos, because nobody else is doing them. Or if somebody else is doing it, it's often a small channel that's trying to figure out how to grow their audience, and then they do a video that nobody watches. And I like doing those kind of videos because there is a role. One of my best performing videos now, it may be my next video that reaches 1 million views. And I did this video almost 6 years ago on how to prune lilacs. And so at the time when I did my how to prune lilacs video, I had moved into this new house. My lilac bushes were overgrown. They needed to be cut back. So I made a video about it and nobody watched it. Who wants to see how to prune lilacs, right? And so when that video came out, it just languished. And I was okay with that because I knew that there was an audience for people who want to know how to prune lilacs. The next year, 5 years ago, this time of year and a little bit earlier, a lot of people watched that video. 4 years ago, a lot of people watched that video. 3 years ago, 2 years ago, 1 year ago, this year, a lot of people watch my video on how to prune lilacs. Next year, I may hit 1 million views on that. It will have taken 7 years to get that many views, but that's because there's 1 million gardeners out there wanting to know how to prune lilacs. And when they look for it, they can't find it. So when you start thinking about making videos, that is one of those kind of considerations. That's the strategy I used is make what gardeners want to see, and they'll discover that you've made a video about it. It may take years for that to happen, but good information is good information. And information in a library, you need to have a big library to have the information that people are looking for. So, that's why when you look at like Tony and me, both of us have very similar channels. We both have over 400,000 views. We are subscribers. We both have over 500 videos because we've been doing this for a while. It takes a long time to reach this point. But when you look at a channel that's got over 500 videos, and there are the bigger channels have over 1,000 videos. Some gardener channels have 2,000 videos. There is often a correlation between the number of videos you have, the quality and the content of those videos, and the fact that we've been doing this for years, and people will discover our library and watch what they want to see and enjoy it along the way. So it's enjoyable. It's a fun journey. Bowtie Life says, it is hilarious to me what gets watched and what doesn't get watched and when. Yeah, I know. I talked about this briefly yesterday when we were talking about raised beds and when I started thinking about when I was going to write a raised bed book. And it goes back years, but one of the points in my gardening journey when I thought, wow, there's something to this raised bed thing, was 5 years ago when I made the video on how to fill a raised bed. Again, one of those that I didn't think anyone would watch because it's so basic. At least I thought it was basic at the time. You have a raised bed, you need to fill it. So how do you fill it? And I just showed how I fill my raised beds. What I didn't know at the time was the way I did it was actually kind of new, and a lot of people hadn't discovered it yet. So 6 years ago, when I was filling my raised beds with logs and branches and leaves in the base, I was the only one making that video. Ever since then, it seems like every gardening channel is making a video about how you fill a raised bed and you put logs in the bottom. But people weren't doing it back then. I didn't know that I was at the leading edge of that trend, which is why that video now has 4.5 million views. And I didn't expect it to do well at all. I thought it was just going to be a few people thinking that they didn't have that information and they would watch it. Instead, it turned into something incredibly successful and ultimately led to me writing a book about raised beds and having a big section of my soil chapter on how to fill a raised bed. And it all started with a video that I thought no one would watch. YouTube is crazy. And so that's why I just make my videos, and hopefully some of you will watch them, and occasionally all of you will watch them depending on the topic of the video. But it is something that you just can't guess. So you just do what you feel is right and you continue to do it. And so Bowtie Life in the Garden, a small channel making some good videos, lots of different content. And it's obvious that Dave puts time into the channel. It's growing, it's getting there, but it's a regular kind of thing that happens. And over time, suddenly an audience appears and watches the videos, and you keep making the content because you like making the content for the people that are watching the videos. So a few things about the YouTube world that I know not all of you are interested in, but it is something to to think about. Johnny Johnson, welcome from PV, Texas. Love your vids, so full of info. I just found you yesterday. Nice. Sunday evening, new subby. Thanks for all you do. Oh, well, thank you for being a new subscriber. Thank you for being here. We do this every Monday. So I hope to see you back. And I'm glad you made the comment. It's always nice to have the new people. In addition, there are some people here. I don't know if you'll enter in the comments or not, but I know there's a few of you that have been here since the beginning. And so when you look at the number that's on the thumbnail of this video, all of my videos now for the last 5 years have a number on it. It's the number of the show. We've been doing this every week for years now, many years. And there's a few of you that were here that long ago and are coming back every week. So thank you so much for that, all of that time, all that support. And then we pick up new people along the way, like Johnny Johnson. So maybe 5 years from now, Johnny Johnson will be one of those that is saying, yeah, I got here 5 years ago. Best thing that ever happened to me. So you're going to love this group. Johnny, it's so fantastic. And of course, you can always ask questions at any time. Hopefully I'll see it. And there you go. Brent says the lilac video is where I discovered this channel. Just make videos and, build it and they will come. That's kind of the way I approach my YouTube channel, is make a video that a gardener wants to see, and eventually a gardener will see it and you'll have a new gardener friend, a new subscriber, a new member of the Gardener Scott community. It's always nice. Shandy's Garden says you sometimes have to think like a new gardener again and look at the Q&As that are out there, using it to title your videos. Oh, absolutely. Yeah, every now and then, and I play around a little bit. I will change up the thumbnails. I'll change up the titles. I'll take some of the suggestions. I don't use AI yet to do my videos, but both YouTube and TubeBuddy that I use as an app will give suggestions on titles. And those suggestions, no doubt, are based on AI learning. And I'll often use the suggested title, and I just don't like it. It's like, no, it just doesn't fit. And I change it to what the new gardener's looking like or looking for. How to divide chives. The initial title for that video was completely different. And now it's just basic, because I agree with you. Sometimes you got to think like a new gardener. You got to think about what they're searching for. And you don't have to play the YouTube game of having the fancy title that brings people in, and then you give them a crappy video and they never watch again. So, okay, let's see. Simplified Gardening says, same for me with container potatoes 14 years ago. Yeah, you look at Tony's channel, and his best performing videos are on potatoes. And that's how a lot of people discovered Simplified Gardening. Back then, what was it? UK Grow with me, or UK Grow? What was your channel, Tony? Tony's changed not only the name of his videos over time, but changed the name of his channel over time to get to what gardeners are looking for, and will bring people to the channel. So you got to think about what people are looking for. In Gardening says, I have a very small channel, just started out last year or so. I did just post one about when I start my plants indoors here in northern Minnesota. There you go. Check out Minnesota Gardening. And MN Gardening is a nice place to get an idea for kind of what we're talking about today, the general topic of when to start your plants. And I did want to talk about this and got a little bit sidetracked. But when we talk about the plants, and I've been talking about putting the plants in the garden, but there's also that window of opportunity for starting your plants indoors. And it is often very localized of when is the best time to start your peppers and your tomatoes indoors. Because when I start my plants, and it's only been just a few weeks ago, there are other gardeners who are already harvesting some of those plants that I'm just starting because my climate is so much different. And so Minnesota follows the same basic trend where our winters are so severe and our last frost date may not be until the middle or end of May. It affects when we start our plants indoor. So I will definitely be checking that out, and always a good opportunity to support some of the smaller channels that are part of our community to help us all grow and to help get the information out there, because you never know what you'll pick up. I watch so many gardening videos, and I still, after more than 35 years of gardening, after being a master gardener for more than 20 years, after having YouTube videos for more than 12 years, I still learn things about gardening by watching YouTube videos. And I'm often learning from some very small channels that are doing things a little bit different, a little unique, and I can modify that technique to fit my garden. So I just appreciate gardening information wherever it comes from. And a lot of you have actually provided me some of that information. Bruce Fahey is asking, can I grow lettuce under the shade of tomatoes in the summer, or will they still bolt? Oh, this ties into what we were just talking earlier about using shade. So if you've got trees that are shading your garden, or if your neighbor puts up a hedge that's shading your garden, then you can grow those cool season plants. Plan for your own plants to shade your garden. And so I've talked about this in a couple different videos. I don't have a dedicated video about it, but I have talked about this because I do that. And one of my ground cover videos, I talk about this, where I plant under the shade of my tomato plants. Because when those seedlings emerge and when those plants first start growing, they're in a sheltered environment that my tomato plants are providing. And yeah, absolutely. Lettuce has a shallow root. It's not going to interfere with the roots of your tomato plants. And so they can actually be a good companion plant for each other, because the tomato doesn't care. It doesn't even know that the lettuce is even growing there for the most part. But the lettuce will be improving the soil. The exudates, the roots growing will benefit ultimately the soil that the tomatoes are growing in, and vice versa. And the shade is making the lettuce plant less likely to bolt. And so intersperse plants throughout your garden using this. Another great way to do it, and I talk a little bit about it in my book, is you can plan your planting in your beds with this exact thought in mind. Normally, we're taught that you put the tallest plants in the back of the bed. So, where regardless of where the sun is coming from. So, for instance, in the northern hemisphere, you would put the tallest plants in the northern side of the beds. In the southern hemisphere, you would put the tallest plants on the southern edge of the beds. That's so all the plants in the bed get equal sun. So you've got the shortest plants closest to the sun, and you've got the tallest plants farthest from the sun. That's because the tall plants are going to shade, and you're assuming, or the assumption is that all of those plants need full sun. Well, change the plan. Put your tallest plants in the middle of the bed, put short plants close to the sun that need full sun, and then behind those tall plants, put the plants that can benefit from shade, like those cool season crops. And so, yeah, it's a definite part of garden planning that you can take advantage of the shade that is forced upon you or that you can create yourself. Definitely take advantage of the shade in your garden, whether it's on purpose because of the type of plants you want to grow, or because, based on the topic today, it is one of those things that you missed the window that you wanted to grow the plants in, and you're worried that they're going to have too much sun. Take advantage of the shade opportunities, and you might still be able to get some of those cool season plants in the ground. So it works. It actually makes a difference. And Jason says, Gardener Scott and everyone. My cat is howling at me, wanting to play with her before nap time. Yeah, I have a dog at my feet that's beginning to get a bit restless, and we're at that time. Thank you so much for everybody being here today. I just love the opportunity to see you all on Mondays and talk gardening. And as I mentioned earlier, I'll be back next week to do it all over again. So if you are new to the channel, I hope to see you again. And if you're an old veteran, I am also hoping to see you again as we do it all over to start our week and get that motivation, get that enthusiasm so that we can enjoy gardening. I'll see you then.